current ratio. We talked about this last week, and I have a handout, and this handout has three companies on it: McDonald's, Yum, and Wendy's. Okay, so you can work in, if you want to work in groups of 2 or 3, that's fine. Just figure out which company you want to calculate for. So, for example, if you're working in with 2 other students in your row or just someone next to you, that way you don't have to calculate all 3 every time. So starting out, actually what we'll do is work in 2s. I'll calculate McDonald's on the board, and you calculate the other 2. One person does Wendy's, one person does Yum. So you don't have to say anything. Just look at the person next to you and nod your head like, yeah, you're working with me, and then we're good. I know you guys don't want to talk, so. Okay. So for the current ratio, we talked about this last week. If I look at McDonald's, I want the current assets divided by the current liabilities. So I look on the spreadsheet. I have total current assets. Nope. Total current assets. I gotta make this bigger. I have to remember I'm not in the class of 30. It's a class of 90. All right. Make it big so you can see current assets divided by current liabilities. So I just look up okay. Okay, and I get 2.61. Okay, so what did you get for Wendy's? Nothing. Okay, he's working on it. Yes. Okay, 2.34. And how about you for Yum? Nothing? Okay. Yum? Yum. You know work too? You both do like work. Copy it. See how it works? Do work together. 1.02? Okay. All right. So this is how we're going to work it tonight. Figure out who's doing Wendy's and who's doing Yum. Copy from the other person so we don't spend a lot of time recalculating. Now, do these calculations by hand because the tactileness of looking up the value and calculating it is going to be help you a good deal to remembering what's happening here. Okay, so which of these 3 current ratios is the best? Okay, somebody said McDonald's, and why is that? Why? Yes, and that signifies they have more current assets than current liabilities, and we all would like more current assets than current liabilities, right? You would like more cash in your bank account and less balance on your credit card, right? You'd rather have $10,000 cash in your bank account and $1,000 owed on your credit card, rather than $10,000 owed on your credit card and $1,000 in the bank. So you see how that works? Bigger the number, the better. Now, to calculate the industry average, I think I'll do that too. But how I do that is I just add up all three and I divide by 3. But that does not really work unless you put a bracket around. Remember your PIMDOS? Well, when I went to school, see if you remember this. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Did anybody go to a school where they told you that? All right, remember that? Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, because she's a real crazy one. Okay, so what we're doing is we're doing an industry analysis on these companies. Let me just resize this so folks at home can see what I'm doing. So this industry analysis is something an analyst would do to figure out which of these companies they should buy. And by the way, Yum is the consortium of Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, KFC, A&W, and Long John Silver's. Everybody go to Long John Silver's? Yeah, Fish. They have there's not too many of them left, but there's a couple. Sometimes they combine the restaurants. Ever go to a KFC/Pizza Hut? Or Taco Bell/Pizza Hut? It's more Taco Bell than Pizza Hut. All they have is like those frozen, not good. Okay, moving on. Okay. Okay, the quick ratio. In the quick ratio, I'll calculate the quick ratio for McDonald's. We're looking again at current assets. So that same 65 current assets minus inventory divided by current liabilities. So why we do this is that for some businesses, some industries, inventory isn't very liquid. So if you're talking about Boeing and the airline industry, and they have a lot of airline parts and partially completed planes, that's not inventory that's going anywhere anytime soon. It's not really current assets. So in some industries, we want to take out the inventory to get a better idea of the comparison of assets to liabilities, and that we call a quick ratio or an acid test ratio. All right. So whenever I have a cell I need to edit, I can just go directly to this edit line up here. Put in my parentheses. Okay. So we see here that we don't have much of a change in McDonald's in this result. Dead pack. So we went from 261 to, when we take out the inventory, 256. All right. So, what do you have for Wendy's? 2.23. And what do you have for Yum? Wendy's? What do you have? You do yet? We'll wait for you. We'll finish your pack. I'm just kidding. That's from the Deadpool movie. You see that? Where naked nuclear sonic warhead girl is like texting, like, finish your tweet, go ahead. You gotta see that movie. You gotta see it. It's really good. Funny. What do you have? Just take it forever. 1.01? 5? Show a little bit of difference. Okay. Again, here McDonald's is the highest, still the best. So this signifies, though, there's very little change into inventory. It's rounded. Okay. All right, relax. The poor guy made a little mistake. It's okay. He's not perfect. I just won't ask him again. All right. So the point is still relevant. So as an analyst, when I'm looking at this, I would say inventory is not significant at these companies. And have you ever worked, does anybody here ever worked for a fast food company? Okay, 1, 2. Anybody ever worked at McDonald's? I worked for McDonald's, and Roy Rogers, and 3 days at Burger King. I just couldn't put up with it. It was horrible there. But there's not a lot of inventory. The food is really not, they don't stock a lot of food in the restaurant. And the food is really a small amount compared to the assets. Okay, look at this. The food in the building, how much is that worth? $5,000? The building's worth $1 million. So the cash they have is worth a lot more. What's that? They don't have there's not a lot of money in inventory because it's food. And food's pretty cheap. You know, they stock enough for a week's worth of food. Maybe they'll have stock. They'll go through all the inventory, usually in a week or less at these fast food restaurants because they sell through pretty quick. They get a new delivery every week. The truck comes in, you unload the truck, you pack up the food, and then you don't want your buns to go stale or your lettuce. So inventory turnovers are pretty decent at these places, but the inventory is small compared to their assets and cash and other factors and accounts receivable. Now, also remember when we look at these companies, a lot of these companies have franchises. So the inventory is kept on the franchisor's books, not on the franchisor. So McDonald's only owns so many of their own restaurants, and the rest are franchises. So the inventory at the franchisor, the person who invests and has their own McDonald's restaurant, so they not run by McDonald's, but it's a franchise through McDonald's, their inventory doesn't count towards McDonald's corporation inventory. And that's why the inventory is so small, because all three of these companies do a lot of franchising. So as an analyst, when you see this, when you see a number, you have to defend it and explain it to people invested in stock. Now, I had much cooler jobs at McDonald's, but I have to say, that was one well-run fast food organization. As far as everything they do there is pretty impressive. I mean, it's not impressive the work there, but they are pretty well organized. And if you manage a McDonald's location, you make decent money. If you're like the, I guess what they would call the head manager or the, I don't know what the name is anymore. Well, the guy who managed the top manager. And then if you're a district manager, you make even more money. So, but don't worry, I only worked there for 6 months. Maybe 9. Oh. All right. Okay, so let's move on to accounts receivable turnover. Now, these restaurants do have accounts receivable because they do sell to the franchisors on account. So when you own a McDonald's franchise, you're buying McDonald's laundry detergent, McDonald's Clorox, McDonald's everything. So that's how McDonald's makes money. They sell everything to the franchisor. So all the food, all the supplies, everything comes from McDonald's. They send a McDonald's truck and they unload it and they sell that to the restaurant. So it's another profit source for McDonald's Corporation because they're making profits on all the foods and products they're selling to the franchisors who are contractually obligated to buy that stuff from McDonald's. And that's why no matter what McDonald's you go to, the food quality is all very similar because you're all getting it from the same source. Okay, so if we look at, well actually, I don't know if this is the next slide. Let's see. I'm going to go order the slides. We're going to do inventory turnover first. Sorry. So cost of goods sold divided by inventory. So here, cost of goods sold is right under revenues. $73,84.10, and we're dividing that by inventory. Cost of goods sold is the labor and material of what they sell. Okay. So McDonald's has, we're just going to say 57. So remember I said before they keep about a week's worth of food at the restaurant? Well, McDonald's Corporation keeps about a week's worth of inventory supplies that they send out to franchisees, about a week's worth. So they're pretty efficient at turning their inventory, sales to inventory. Now also, what's also muddling this is that in that sales number, it's not strictly sellable goods to franchisers. It's also some sales from additional streams of revenue from their own stores they own, or maybe if there's any other revenue that they may have. So for the fast food industry, inventory turnover is not something that you really worry about as an analyst too much. It's not like that's for more of a manufacturer. And that's when you start becoming good analysts, because then you start knowing which financial ratios are more important to which industry. And inventory turns is not that important to, say, a fast food industry. All right. Who has Wendy's? Say someone from the back row in the center back. Anybody want to volunteer? Otherwise, I'm going to get the back row because they look like they're not doing anything. Not you guys. These girls over here. They're on there. You guys working? Okay. And hello. Can you do the other one? Do you know what the other one is? Yes, you. Okay. Excellent. You got it correct. I stand impressed. Okay, so we see that Wendy's has, the higher this number, the better. Wendy's has the lowest number here. Let's make that a little bit bigger. Wendy's has the lowest number here. But this, again, isn't significant because inventory is not a big concern for fast food companies. And these turns are actually pretty high. Manufacturers have much smaller turns of inventory, and retailers as well. So let's look at average, let's see, I want to go to the, before we want to follow the PowerPoint, whatever next here. Average age of inventory. Now this is something that I don't have on the handout, but we could calculate it by hand. So 365 divided by inventory turnover. So 365 divided by 52, 57. So this will give us our average age of the inventory. $365 divided by 57. Okay. Okay, so now this is not on your handout, so don't be confused. Some of the slides are not on the handout, and vice versa. Okay, so McDonald's inventory, average age of inventory is 6.4 days. Does anybody have Wendy's and Yum? Remember, take the answer that you have for inventory turns, 365 divided by your inventory turns that you calculated. Yes, with your hand up. And do you have a Wendy's or maybe somebody you're working with? Yes? Okay. So they're all close to 7 days. Again, this is not that significant, but you could see that if one of these companies were like 20 days, that could be an issue. So if you have if they're in inventory terms for fast food, as long as they're around a week, that's okay because that's sort of the de facto industry average. If you see a fast food franchisor who has inventories that are much higher, then that's a problem. So if you see Chipotle and they have 21-day inventory on their food, maybe that's why they have health concerns. I don't know what their actual inventory, their days of inventory, average days of inventory is. I'm just speculating. If they had very long days of inventory, maybe that could be a reason analysts could say that they need to be more efficient as a management team to keep their food fresher. You know, although I don't think it's a problem with their food being fresh. Their food's pretty fresh. It's just some unknown reason there's some contaminants have been found in them in the past, which I hope they clear up because I eat there quite frequently. I'm not afraid. Okay. So, see what's next. Okay, here we go. Average collection period. Is it doing that? Alt-tab is what I want. So, average collection period, good. I have that down. So, we're going to look at accounts receivable divided by average sales per day. So this is where it may get a little confusing here. So first let's pull up the accounts receivable for McDonald's. 734 million. These are in the millions, by the way. And we're going to divide by average sales per day. So to calculate average sales per day, we take the annual sales, 22,151,000,000, and divide by 365. And this will give us our average collection period. So again, I'm going to start with accounts receivable, and I'm going to divide by 365. Nope. And divide by sales, the revenue, and then divide by 365. I'm going to put the slide back up for you. Okay. So here, annual sales divided by 365, and you take accounts receivable divided by that result. So here I got 12.10 days. That means it took McDonald's 12.10 days to collect any money on account. That is really fast. Does anybody have Wendy's? Yes. Result. And 736. Perfect. Okay. So here, let's see. What are we calculating? So it looks like Yum Brands collects their money the fastest compared to McDonald's or Wendy's. But this could be a factor also of how many franchises that these companies own. So if McDonald's and Wendy's have a very high percentage of their stores as franchises, and Yum Brands actually has a lot more corporate stores. So the corporate stores do a lot more business transactions in cash and credit cards. And that's what helps to lower their days of collection. So it only takes them 7 days to collect because they're collecting more money immediately in cash or within 3 days on a credit card. Actually, maybe 24 hours on a credit card. So that helps to lower their overall days of collection. Okay. Now, for an industry that is 100% sales from business to business, or B2B, that's where that term's from, business to business. So if you're a parts manufacturer, you manufacture bicycle wheels and you sell to companies that make bikes, you're doing business to business, you're not selling to a individual customer as far as consumer, citizen, you're going to do all your business on account. And that's why it's important to know for companies like that who gets credit, and the better you manage your credit, the quicker you collect your money. Basically, you lend to people who are most likely to pay you back. Okay, average payment period. I don't think I bothered to put this one in. Yeah. So the average payment period is the same calculation, but it's done on the other side. It's from the payable side. So here, there's not a space on the handout, so we'll calculate this one by hand using the formula here. And again, we have to divide by the days. Average purchase per day, annual purchases. And I don't think we have purchases here, so I don't think we can calculate this. All right, so we're skipping this one because I don't have purchases on the handout as far as a separate term. But this is just looking at how reliable the company is as paying their debts. So this is something a creditor would be most interested in. Not a stockholder, not an owner, but more like a creditor would be interested in how quickly do these companies pay their bills. Because that would denote if you pay your bills in a very small amount of time, then I want to lend you money and sell your products on account because you pay your bills fast. So this would be something creditors would look at more specifically for a company. Because it tells you how quickly, basically, how quickly these companies will pay their debts. Just like for you, there's a number on how quickly you pay your credit card bills. So if you have credit card accounts, do you pay them every month, or do you sometimes miss a payment, pay every 60 days? Maybe it's not credit cards, maybe it's something stupid like Optum Online, where they don't really charge you if you miss a month, it's not a big deal, so pay that once a quarter until you start getting the threatening letters. Okay. Total asset turnover, that's the next big one we're going to look at, and that's going to be sales divided by total assets. And believe me, McDonald's has a lot of assets. Now, the reason we're doing this by hand and you're taking the time, and I appreciate your effort in class in calculating these, it's part of a process, it's part of a learning process. So you might not specifically understand, why should I sit here and calculate these if he's just going to reveal the answer in a few seconds? The reason is you need this tactile process of actually calculating yourself to get a feel for it, because there's going to be many times in the homework tests and spreadsheet problems where you're going to be calculating it. And this gets you a little bit closer to having these committed to memory. Having these formulas committed to memory. And it could come in very handy in various situations, such as it isn't inconceivable that someone may ask you a formula to a financial ratio during an interview, especially if it's a financial-based interview. Okay. Then when you get, actually I'll go around and take somebody. People are quiet over here. You have, calculate for buddies. So let's look at these results here. Okay. He was right. That's why you need to work together, so you could kind of check your answers a little bit. Now, so if we look at this, who has the better ratio here? Yum has a better ratio because the higher this ratio, the better. So this relates also to the simulation you're working on. So what we're doing here is we're looking at revenues compared to assets. You want your revenues to be higher than assets. So you may have a poor total asset turnover in the simulation if you went and bought a huge amount of unnecessary assets, meaning that you went and bought factories you don't need. So you only needed one factory, but you bought 3 for the hell of it. Or maybe you had a lot of leftover inventory, cars you didn't sell. That becomes part of your asset base. So the bigger your asset base, the harder it is to have a higher return on assets. So what we want is that we want our assets to generate sales. Let me give you an example of this, okay? 2 ice cream stores. One ice cream store, okay? They don't have a lot of assets. What they have is a refrigerator, tubs of ice cream, scoops and cups, and some toppings. Maybe the whole store, the assets they have are $10,000. They even rent the store. They don't own the store. Okay, so they set that business up for, basically it took them $10,000. They could set that business up and start selling ice cream. Now, the business next door is one of those red mangoes. And they have 6 or 7 soft-serve ice cream or frozen yogurt machines and a bunch of fancy counters and furniture in the store. There's no furniture in the first ice cream store. You just walk in, you get your ice cream, and you go. You don't even sit down. You can stand and eat it if you want. That's it. But the red mango has like fancy displays. And the red mango has $1 million of inventory. Each of those soft serve machines are like $100,000. So they have a lot. In fact, this is why you're seeing all these red mangoes close. Have you seen a lot of these open and close? That's why they're closing, because they spend too much on assets. Now, if both stores generate $1 million in revenues, okay, $1 million in revenues, how much ice cream do you have to sell a day to make $1 million in revenue? I'll figure it out for you, don't worry. It's a good question, though. $2,739 of ice cream a day, which at the average, what's the average price per ice cream these days? Is about, believe it or not, $7. Average price. So that's only 391 ice cream servings a day you have to sell. I guess it's doable. Oh no, if you're in Penn Station. Right. So we'll say, $10,000 in assets versus, this is the first, and this is the red mango, which is the same, $1 million in sales and $1 million in assets. So they have total asset turnover 1, where this store has 100. So which company would you rather own? If this company goes bankrupt, you owe $1 million to pay those. You still have to pay for those assets. This company is bankrupt. You only lost $10,000. Who cares? I can open up. You know how many of these ice cream stores I can open up? I can only open up 1 red mango. I can only get about $1 million worth of credit to open up 1 red mango. But I can open up probably 100 of these stores. 100 of these ice. So if out of 100, 25 fail and 75 make it, that's fine. So you see how assets matter? Because it really determines how much you're going to borrow and how efficient your business is. So that's why a lot of businesses are getting rid of assets. They're selling their real estate. If you've ever been to Chicago, you know there's a place called Sears Tower in Chicago. It's with the big 2. And Sears sold that a long time ago. They got rid of that asset. Southwest, do you think they own their planes? Hell no, they lease them from Boeing. Yeah, they don't buy those planes, they're leasing them. Right? Just like you might lease an automobile. Keep your assets low. It makes your return on assets better, it makes a lot of your financial ratios better. Who wants to, invest a lot of money in assets if you don't have to? There's no loss here. These assets have accumulated over a long time. So this has nothing to do with profits. This is just looking at how much sales you can generate from your asset base. So McDonald's can't even generate 1 times their asset base. They have a lot of real estate. McDonald's, they often refer to McDonald's as mostly a real estate company because they do own a lot of real estate, and that bloats their assets. But Wendy's and Yum are a little bit more efficient, so Yum would be the company with the most efficient use of their assets. Again, these numbers are actually pretty low, but for industry average of 1, they're not too off the base. So again, a critical point here is sometimes in the simulation, you may not do well. I don't know if I still have that up. Yeah. So in the simulation, if you look, total asset turnover, I have 1.6 here, and I went to 1.4. And so I'll go under assessments, and I'll look under total asset turnover here, and there's little hints here. My performance is low. It says don't buy extra operational plants you can't utilize. Make sure your capacity utilization is above 80. Also, if I check under my production, I'll see that I had inventory. That bloated my assets. I could check under my finance, and I could see, well, where are my assets? My assets are 112 million, and my revenues are 243 million. So I could see that my assets are bloated. And that's why I'm losing points on that ratio, because I'm not being efficient with my assets. I could be more efficient. And the assessment on the simulation is what's telling me I didn't perform well compared to my peers, which would be you guys. So when you do the simulation after a round, practice or team, look at those assessments and see what they're saying. Are you performing well in categories? If not, look at those hints. It's like a built-in financial ratio analysis for your company. Okay, let's move to the debt ratio. Well, actually, let's hope that the slides, I'm not sure if the slides are, I'm trying to go in order of the slides here, so. Oh, good, it's in order. Debt ratio, total liabilities divided by total assets. So here we're doing total liabilities to total assets to see what percentage of our assets are financed from debt. Okay. 0.41% of my assets are financed by debt. So my debt ratio, and for this particular ratio, the lower the number, the better. So it means that less of my assets are financed by debt. So some debt is okay. So in the simulation, don't be afraid to take on some debt, do some long-term, short-term debt to get the money you need to grow your company. You know, that is one of the reasons behind the whole the franchising thing at McDonald's, is that they wanted to expand quicker but not take on a lot more debt, so they came up with this franchise system where they bring in someone else's capital to help them to expand. And when you have a good idea for a restaurant, you want to expand that really fast. Do you know this place Carbo Fresh over here? If Chipotle was on their game and they expanded quick enough, there would never been a Carbo Fresh. Because there would have been a Chipotle's over here by the mall, Carbo Fresh would never stand a chance. Because it's basically a knockoff of Chipotle. They only have 2 stores. I'm not saying it's not a good store, it's delicious. Margaritas you can't beat. Me and him go after class, we have 3 or 4 of them. But he pays, so know,
No problem.
yeah. That's because Chipotle didn't roll out their restaurants fast enough. And competitors say, hey, Chipotle's great. Everyone loves it. Let me make something similar. You can't copyright a burrito. They don't franchise. That's why they're slow to roll stores out. But they have a lot of financing from the stock market. They went public, got a lot of money from their equity, and they make a lot of money. The business is profitable, but they can only expand so fast. Different model. But they'll keep more of the profits if they don't have franchisers. So they don't have to share the profits with anybody. So it's a slightly different system. Okay. Did anybody get anything for the debt ratio for Wendy's? Yes. And Yum Brands with the Coke. Yes, you. Okay. Yes. Okay. So which is who holds up the best? Sorry, I'm not used to this Mac-related keyboard here. Isn't copying. Oh, okay. Oh, you know what's screwing me up? It's a Mac keyboard attached to a PC. So I'm trying to do the Mac commands, but I keep forgetting it's a PC. I'm on the PC side, not the Mac side. All right, so that would be the industry average here. Okay, so yeah, Wendy's has the lowest debt to assets. So they have more of their assets are financed with equity, not liabilities. So next we're going to look at debt to equity. Okay, so let me explain debt to equity a little bit. So you have a company here. We'll say this is McDonald's. And McDonald's is two things. The sum of this company equals liabilities and equity. Liabilities plus equity equals McDonald's. McDonald's is only made up of two things. Liabilities and equity. Nothing else. Think of McDonald's as the asset. McDonald's Corporation is the asset. So assets equal liabilities plus equity. So McDonald's is just liabilities and equity. So the reason for the total debt to equity ratio is that we want to see how much how much equity there is in the business. So here, total liabilities divided by equity. So again, total liabilities divided by total equity. And equity is also known as book value. Book value and equity, again, remember I told you we name things twice to keep things confusing. So the debt to equity here is 71%. So here's the liability. So we think of this as 100%. No, we don't want to think of it that way. Let me just put the ratio down. So what is 71% of 16.6 billion? 11.8 billion. So these are the liabilities. This is the equity. So we would say the debt to equity ratio is 0.71. So the lower this ratio, I have a little note I left for myself here. The lower this ratio is, the better. Shows lower usage of debt. So McDonald's has, let's see what the other. Okay. So it looks like Wendy's has the lowest. We got 6.3 and you get 1.18. So Wendy's actually has the lowest debt to equity. So it means that the company has the most equity in it compared to its peers. But still, you'll see that all these companies are using a fair amount of debt. And there's nothing wrong with using debt, but you don't want to use too much of it. And the reason you don't want to use too much of it is because it makes you financially risky. Just like in your own lives, you don't want to take out too many credit cards and charge up too many credit cards. Because at a certain point, you're not going to be able to afford it. So you have to ask yourself, how much credit card debt can I afford a month? What's the most I would ever really want to have in total credit card debt? That's a good number to think of. Think of it before you get there. Okay, let's see if that's next actually. Yes, good. Times interest earned. Here, we're looking at EBIT divided by taxes. So here I got a tax rate. I don't think I calculated total taxes. But we got the rate, so we could calculate it. Okay. So this is what we're going to do. We have earnings before interest and tax for McDonald's is 42.7 is the EBIT. The tax rate is 22%. So if I want to figure out the taxes, I need to multiply earnings before interest and tax should take out the interest expense, but I'm just going to multiply. All right, bye. Bye. It's okay. People have places to go sometimes. She might be back. It might just be a break or something. It's getting a little. It's only been an hour. Okay. Okay, so in this spreadsheet, I have given the EBIT, so I should really calculate the taxes. I'm going to actually create a line here. You can't do this, but I'm going to at least give your tax number. Tax. And I'm going to take the EBIT, subtract out my interest expense, right? Because you don't, interest is a deduction. And then I'll multiply by my tax rate. Do my parentheses. And change that, should not be a percentage. Okay. This is going to be. That's interesting. How is this 50%? That's an average. Oh. Well, these averages are. Oh, these averages are correct. Yeah. Okay. Those averages weren't correct. Sorry. All right. Okay, so we have the tax dollars and we have our EBIT. So we're looking at EBIT divided by taxes. Our taxes are 1622. So you may want to copy down your tax number. For Wendy's is 821.5, and for Yum, oh, I'm sorry, that's the earnings. Wendy's 115.95 is the tax dollars, and Yum is 243.47. So let's do this again. EBIT divided by tax dollars, the money we're paying in taxes, and we have, wait a minute. Something screwy here. I must, times interest earned. Times interest earned ratio divided by taxes. Following interest before interest taxes, the same operating costs. Taxes. Okay. No, I don't like. I'm not crazy about the way they calculate. There's other ways of calculating it, but we'll go with what the slide says. How I would typically calculate it would I would take the operating earnings divided by the interest expense. All right. They went this way, so I'll go this way. All right, so times interest earned. The higher this number, the better. So Wendy's has 7 times the ability to pay for their interest. Yes. I created a new row. Right. I took the earnings. I subtracted out the interest expense and divided by the tax percentage, because you don't pay tax on your interest. I mean, this formula that the slide is denoting is a little suspicious, because typically it's calculated by operating earnings, or EBIT, divided by interest, not taxes. So I'm not exactly sure what they're going for here, but okay. Now we're moving on to the, hopefully we're moving on. Let's see what the, all right. Okay, this is not in the handout, not in your handout today, but I'm just going to go over it. You don't have to calculate this. They have a fixed payment coverage ratio where we're looking at our earnings and lease payments divided by interest, lease payments, and payment principals plus preferred dividends, blah, blah, blah. It's a pretty big formula. It's not really that utilized, but it's supposed to look at your payments compared to your earnings to see how well you can cover your fixed costs. But don't worry about this. You're not going to calculate this on this handout. And if you did have to calculate it in the homework, it's just a lengthy formula, but not a particularly difficult formula. There's just more variables in it. All right. Okay, so let's just recap what we have so far. When we look at a company, we're just going to recap on the income statement here. So if we look at a company, and this is a common size, remember we did this last class when we created percentages or a common size income statement? The common size income statement, we did those percentages last time. And the reason we do that, we want to see if the cost of goods sold is a higher percentage. That's not good, because costs going up is not good. And profits going down, we went from 33 to 32%, is not good either. So denoting it worse and worse. So we have a situation where sales are the same, costs are up, profits are lower. If you do that in the simulation, if you allow your costs to go up and you don't, that's going to be bad for your profits, bad for your points on your financial ratios. Because the simulation is basically measuring on your performance of your financial ratios. So in the simulation, you want to make sure that your costs are lower and your profit margins are higher. How can you lower your costs in the simulation? Right. You can make operational investments which makes producing your car cheaper. And you can also make a cheaper car if you want to reduce your costs. If you're Chips Ahoy and you want to reduce your costs, you give your consumer 10 less cookies. But in the packaging, you create a plastic cookie holding tray so the packaging looks the same size, but the holding tray just has more space in it between cookies. So ever buy a bag of cookies and it's sort of like you open it up and it looks like there should be 50 cookies in there, but there's about 20 because they have a spacing between each cookie. It's very disappointing, you know. And they do that to lower costs. So instead of getting 30 garbage bags, you're getting 26. But who really has it memorized how many garbage bags you get when you go to the supermarket and you buy your regular garbage bag, or how many ounces of peanut butter, or ounces of yogurt, or ounces of cereal? I have all that memorized. I was the first to notice that Haagen-Dazs was less than a pint. I'm like, where's my other 2 ounces? Now it's like, where's my other 4 ounces? But I'm okay with Ben & Jerry's because they actually have printed on their packaging still a pint. Take that, Haagen-Dazs. All right, well, moving on. The selling expense is lower, so that's better. You're spending less on selling expenses. Your administrative expenses are higher. That's worse. Probably gave people raises. The lease expense is lower, so that's better. Depreciation expense is lower, so that's better. Get the feel for it. If it's an expense and it's lower, that's better. Total operating expenses is lower, so that's better. Profit margin is higher, 11 to 13, so operating profit margin is higher. That is better. So how do they had a lower gross profit margin but a higher operating profit margin? That's because they controlled their expenses better. The interest expense was lower, so they paid some awesome debt, got a lower interest expense or refinanced. And their net profits is higher, net profit ratio, so that's better. Their taxes are higher, which is worse. And their net profits after taxes is higher, which is better. So this is why we do that common size income statement. It's kind of putting everything in a ratio, a percentage where you can easily compare and see. And that's why it's important to understand that before we get into the profit margins. So profit margins are what I feel is the most important ratios to look at when you're analyzing a company. And it's the most important ratios for the simulation. If you should know what is your current gross profit margin on year 0. That's the first thing you should know before you even start designing a car. And let me give you a hint. It's 40%. So if you make cars that have profit margins less than 40% in round 1, you're losing this simulation. You're losing your shareholders. Your stock price is not going to appreciate as fast as other companies. Because what are shareholders looking for? Maximizing their wealth. And you don't maximize their wealth when you don't increase their profit margins. And that's why people don't like companies that can't increase their profit margins and control their costs. And the food industry has a lot of costs. One big thing is labor now. How much do these food workers want to get paid now at fast food companies? $15 an hour. That's a cost. How much have you seen the cost of eggs the last year and a half? They're double. Right? When you go to McDonald's, it used to be 2 for $3 egg McMuffins. Now it's 2 for $3.50 because of the cost of eggs. So they either pass the cost on through raising prices, or they have to cut back their costs somehow in the restaurant. Now, if we look at the profit margin, it's pretty simple to calculate. Sales minus cost of goods sold divided by sales, or gross profits divided by sales. So how do you calculate gross profits? Basically sales minus cost of goods sold. So for McDonald's gross profits, we have 14,766.9 divided by their sales, which are 22 billion. Okay, so their profit margin is 67%. That's pretty good. Did anybody calculate Wendy's? Yeah. 35%. And do you have Yum? Or? Okay, so the McDonald's has the highest profit margin. You think McDonald's is more expensive than Taco Bell? Definitely. You go to Taco Bell and for like $5 get a whole box of food. Right? Or they have, I don't know, a lot of the tacos are less than $1. I mean, you can make out with you get a lot more food for your money at Taco Bell. Wendy's has that 4 for $4. Anybody have that? They have Wendy's on campus. They have that 4 for $4 on campus. Oh, they left? We used to have them. Does anybody remember that? Okay, what replaced them? Anything better? Do you know we used to have a California Pizza Kitchen on campus? And we used to have a Friendly's on campus? That's going way back. Somebody remembers that? Friendly's on campus. Is it still here? Probably not. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what happened, but it's gone. Wendy's is really popular on campus. I'm sorry to see it go. But anyway, they have the 4 for $4. You get 4 food items for $4. Now if you go to Burger King, you get the 5 for $4. So they had to one-up Wendy's. McDonald's don't play that game. There's no 4 for $4 McDonald's. It's like 2 for $5. You can get 2 things for $5 and like it. And they're 2 crappy things too. It's like a big chicken nugget on a bun and some fillet of fish. You're going to love it. Although, I did go to McDonald's yesterday and I said, I'd like the mozzarella sticks. And he says, oh, we don't have that. I'm like, I'm sorry, mozzarella sticks? He's like, no, you don't understand. It's not the way you're pronouncing it. We don't have it anymore. I was like, all right, I thought, because last time they were all upset the way I pronounced it. Mozzarella, I don't know. Who cares? Give me my damn cheesy sticks. But they don't have them anymore. I don't know why. I tried grilling the guy. He didn't know. I'm like, I was here yesterday. You had them. You need to know why. I once went insane because I went to a McDonald's that didn't have, I think, a sweet and sour sauce. One of the chicken nugget sauces. And the guy told me, oh, they don't make that anymore. I was like, bullshit. I was just at McDonald's the other day and I got 5 of them. I go, let's get this straight here. Get the manager over here. Wait, sir, you're in a drive-thru. You're holding us up. I don't care. Get the manager. And I talked to the manager. I'm like, all right, is it that they don't make it anymore, or that you discontinue it as a franchiser because you no longer want to order it because it's too much money? I said, I'm checking this, so you better give me some right answers here. So he admitted, yeah, we just don't want to buy it anymore, so barbecue sauce okay? I'm like, yeah, it's fine, let's go.
Give me 2.
Yeah. All right, so let's look at the operating profit margins. And here, we're going to take operating income divided by sales. See that? Operating income divided by sales. Operating profits divided by sales, which is also known as EBIT. Okay, so for McDonald's, I got 35%. Okay, so how does a company go from 67? Now, when I say gross profit margins, for every dollar I sell, I get 67 cents in gross profits. But operationally, for every dollar I sell, I only get 35 cents after operational costs. So what is the biggest cost here, do you think, that brings McDonald's margin down so much, and also it looks like Yum Brands margin down so much? What does McDonald's and Yum Brands do more than what Wendy's does in their operations? It's also the single biggest factor in how, when you run the Zoom simulation, how you lose your profit margin points as well, your operational profit margin points. Yes, advertising. So in order, now we all know that Taco Bell is just terrible for you, but in order to get people to continue to buy it, did you know that someone on Long Island died from food poisoning from Taco Bell 10 years ago? Yeah, you remember that? And it was a store in Nassau County, and they had E. coli, and that's why, Chipotle's like, hey, no one died, but that's why a lot of investors are saying, like, listen, Jack in the Box and Taco Bell, they actually kill people, and they're still around, so I should invest in Chipotle now before anybody realizes their business will eventually come back, because people have short memories. And, I mean, when you're hungry, you don't remember all the news stories about each restaurant. You just, hot coffee? I don't care. Let's go. Okay. So, yeah, McDonald's and Yum Brands, even Wendy's, they do advertise a tremendous amount to get you into those restaurants. Otherwise, you'd forget about them. Or otherwise, they couldn't. And McDonald's, particularly devilishly efficient at advertising to children. So if you were a child recently, or have a younger brother or sister, or maybe a child yourself, you know that once they get McDonald's in their brain, there's nothing you can do but take them to McDonald's and get that off their brain. Okay. Let's go to the net profit margin, and here we're going to take the net profits pass it. Gross operational total net income. Net profits is also known as total net income divided by sales. It's also known as revenues. Okay. And we see here that who has the highest on this chart here? Who has the highest profit margin? McDonald's. They have the highest profit margin. And they do charge, on average, more for their food than the other restaurants. Because they're considered, of fast food, a premium, sort of a premium fast food brand. Where they can charge a little bit more because they have the food people want and the advertising is effective, and people aren't going to be dissuaded by, if you get a value meal at Wendy's, you maybe pay $6.70, and at McDonald's you pay $7.75. For most people, the extra dollar doesn't matter if you're doing that. Okay. Now, let's go back to the... Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. So this is the net profit margin, and that's earnings divided by sales, net income divided by sales, or net profit divided by sales, depending on how you want. It's all the same number. All right. Okay. So earnings per share. When we calculate this, we take the when it says earnings available to common stockholders, that could either mean net profits or net income. So the key thing here is you're looking for something, usually it says net. And we divide it by the number of outstanding common stock. So that's actually calculated down here. So I'm just going to take total net income and divide by outstanding shares. And I get for McDonald's, $1.45 per share. Okay. So, if you see, McDonald's has the lowest earnings per share compared to Wendy's and Yum brands. Now, that's a problem. And you should say to yourself, well, they have the highest earnings per share, and they have actually the most earnings. Why do they have the lowest earnings per share? And I don't like this accounting currency. I like this currency better. Okay, so we go up to the top. We see that we look at total net income here. McDonald's has $1.6 billion of income, profits. Yum has $236 million. I'm sorry, Yum has $617 million, and Wendy's has $236 million. So what I need to do here is go here and view and freeze panes and freeze top row. So I always have Wendy's at the top. Okay. So you see that McDonald's has the most income, but they also have the most outstanding shares. They have 114 million shares for Wendy's and 292 million shares for Yum. So McDonald's has the most outstanding shares, over 1 billion outstanding shares. So basically, even though they have the most profits, you have to share them with more people. So that's a key consideration to buying McDonald's stock, is saying that, you know what, even though they're the best and they have the highest numbers in sales and profits in total dollars, they also have the most shareholders. So if I buy 1 share of McDonald's stock, I'm getting a much smaller piece of ownership than if I buy 1 share of Wendy's. Now this ties to the simulation, because if you buy back your stock and you have a lower amount of outstanding shares, your earnings per share will increase, and that will make shareholders happier. But if it comes at the cost of expanding your company, then that may limit your potential future growth if you spend too much money buying back stock. So it's sort of a sweet spot that you have to realize. That you want to buy some back, but not too much. And as the stock price goes up, the more expensive it is to buy back your stock. So anyway, per share, the best value is to buy a share of 1 stock of Yum brands and getting the most earnings per share. Okay, so let's take a step back, look, return on assets. So it's earnings divided by total assets. So return on assets here, we're going to take, again, the net income, the net profits, and we're going to divide by assets. Okay. All right. So this one you can calculate and do return on equity, which is going to be, I'm going to look at these together, that's why. We took total equity, profits divided by sorry for bouncing around book value. Should be earnings divided by equity. Yes, earnings divided by common equity. And assets are earnings divided by assets. So we're looking for total equity is what you're going to divide by. It's also called book value. So you take, for the assets, you take total assets to, for both of them, you're going to start with your earnings, which here, total net income. And for assets, you divide by assets, and for equity, you divide by equity to get the return on assets and return on equity. All right. I'll give people a second to calculate the other two. Do these look right? Okay. So let's just talk about return on assets and return on equity. So assets are an investment. So that's why we compare profits to assets. How much, what's my return for my investment in my assets? So I have this, McDonald's has a big asset base, so we can see that their return is smaller because even though they have a lot of profits, they have even more assets compared to return on assets is higher at Wendy's and even higher at Yum Brand. So Yum Brand has a good control, management control on their assets. They're keeping their assets light in relationship to their profits, so they're having a higher return on assets. You know, for example, let's think of you have two different people here in the same car. So we'll look at you two. You both have a new Honda Civic. Can you live with that? Okay. Now, who has a higher return on the asset? They're, say, a $20,000 car. You just drive this car around to school, and to girlfriends, and to home, and maybe a couple trips. Car isn't making any profits for you. You actually started a Chinese, an Uber. That's a great reference. You start an Uber business with your car, okay? And what is Uber? You drive people around. It's like a taxi, right? So you're actually making profits from your car. So your return, the car's $20,000, and you made $10,000 this year in profits from your Uber business. So your return on your assets are. Give me a second to think about it. 10,000 divided by 20,000. 50%, and yours is 0%. So you've made no money on your car. But don't feel bad, that's how most of us are. But you actually are an entrepreneur, and you turn your car into a business, and you have a return on an asset. That's what we're looking for in a business. How else could you make money with your car? You could rent it out to people, make a car rental business. Kind of risky though, right? Would you feel comfortable renting your car out to somebody? No? You could make deliveries out of your car. You could... any other ideas for making money from a car? We got deliveries, give people rides. What?
Race it.
You can race it, drag racing. I don't know if people do that other than the movies. Is that real? Okay. I didn't hear what you said, I'm sorry. Oh, do the drag racing. Okay. So McDonald's has the worst utilization of their assets. A lot of their assets are not as efficient as, and that's because they have so much real estate that's really holding them back compared to Yum and Wendy's don't have as much real estate, and as much valuable real estate. If we look at return on equity, you can understand assets, but a lot of times students have a hard time understanding what equity is. Okay? So we're going to go back to that same scenario with that car, and we'll say that your car is 100% paid for, which means 100% equity. Your car, you learned from him, you started not Uber, but Lyft business. So he kind of was in class next to you one day telling you how much money he made. So you said, you know what? I'm going to go Lyft. So with your car, you both make the same amount, $10,000 in profits from your driving business. And your cars both cost $20,000, except your car, you borrow $10,000 in debt to buy your car. So your car, you put $10,000 down, borrow $10,000 in a car loan. So your equity is $20,000, your equity is $10,000. Who has a higher return on equity? Well, let's do the math. $10,000 in profits, $20,000 in equity, you have a 50% return on equity. Same as your assets, because your assets are fully equitable. Now you have a $10,000 equity because it's 50% borrowed, 50% cash down, and that cash is your equity. So you have 50% equity. So if you take the $10,000 you made in your business, divide by the $10,000 of equity, you have a 100% return on your equity. So that's good. That's better than him. You know what you could have done if you had $20,000? What you should have done if you had $20,000 is buy 2 cars. So you could have put $10,000 down in each car and took out 2 $10,000 loans. Now you just doubled your business, except you have to hire another driver, which is going to make an additional cost. But this is how what we look at is that if you could stretch out take your equity and make it smaller in relationship to your debt and stretch out and expand your business, that's a smarter business move. So you shouldn't have, no business should be 100% financed with equity. There should be some debt in there that you're borrowing to expand your business, because if you don't expand it, the competitor will move in and take your business. So if you're the first one under Uber and you got 10 cars going before other competitors came and realized what Uber was, you'd have a good foothold in the market, but only if you borrowed money to do it. So that's why we like to look at this return on equity to see, of my ownership stake in the business, what type of return am I getting for it? So your ownership stake is only $10,000 and you got a $10,000 return. That's what investors like, a higher percentage return on equity, the money that's invested. So the money invested in McDonald's returns 10%, the money invested in Wendy's is 12%, but the money invested in Yum is generating 20% return on equity, because Yum has more debt. So we saw that up here when we look at the debt ratio. Yum has the most debt. We saw that up here, debt and debt to equity. That means just like you having more debt on the car, you had a higher return. Same thing for Yum. They are borrowing more money to expand their business. So the only drawback is that it's riskier, right? You don't got to worry if you don't have any business because there's no car payment. You have to worry. If your business slows down, you have a car payment to make. So your business is riskier. And that's kind of one of the things we look at when we look at these ratios. Okay, so moving on. Don't worry, we're almost done with this. Let's just power on through. Okay. So return on equity we talked about. PE ratio, price to earnings ratio. This is something that we take the stock price divided by the earnings per share. Okay, so for the PE ratio, again, at this point, the stock price is what's sometimes referred to as the market price. And we're going to divide that by earnings per share. This is right here. So McDonald's has a PE of 24. Means that the stock is trading at 24 times earnings. I'm just going to look at I want to see what their PE is today. Oh, actually, their PE is still 24 today, 24.86. And actually, remember we saw the revenues of McDonald's was 22 billion. Now it's up to 25 billion. Let's see. Just looking at this. Return on equity is now 42. All right. This is just McDonald's as it is today. Just want to see if their PE has changed a great deal. The PE hasn't changed a great deal, but their stock price has gone up because their earnings have gone up. Here, the stock price was 35. Now McDonald's trades at over 100. What's it trading? Just want to see what 120. So that would have been a good investment to make at the time I put this together. McDonald's is doing pretty well. So again, this is, do you know, I can explain this to you in a way of the economy of like. So if you ever have, everybody here at one time has a Facebook account, and if you posted something that people liked, they gave you a thumbs up, and you had like a number of likes on it, it was a measure of how much people liked that post. So I once had a post that had 3 likes on it, so it was pretty well received. I only have 4 friends on Facebook. All right. But the more likes, it means the more people like it. The higher this, these are like a like count. The higher this PE, the more people like the stock. The more they're willing to pay for the stock. They're willing to pay 24 times McDonald's, but only 15 times Wendy's, and 21 times Yum Brands. So people like McDonald's to the factor of 24 likes. Only 15 likes for Wendy's and 21 likes for Yum. But if they're too well liked, they can become overvalued. Because remember, it's a multiple of earnings per share and stock price. So if McDonald's had a PE of 100, it'd be trading at $145 per share. That's a little expensive considering it's currently at 35 on this spreadsheet. Okay, book value per share. We're going to take the equity. You see I put in quotations book value, and divide that by the earnings per the outstanding shares. So book value divided by outstanding shares to give you the book value per share. Get it? So this means if you buy 1 share of stock, if you buy 1 share of McDonald's, the book value, what this means is if you take all the assets and you subtract all the liabilities, you're left with the equity, right? You take your car, you take your loan of $20,000, subtract the $10,000 you borrowed, your equity is $10,000, what you paid in the car. So divide that by the amount of outstanding shares, you get the book value per share. So basically, if the company shut down, they sold everything, paid off all their debt, they returned to you $14.47 per share. But these are not relatable. You can't really relate these because we have to look at, we like to look at the market to book value. So this market to book value is something that's going to make these numbers a little bit more relatable because they have different stock prices. So that's why these book value per shares are nice, but they have to be related to book value to make them comparable. Okay, so the book value per share, common equity divided by the number of shares, but the market to book is going to be the stock price divided by the book value per share. So when it says market price, that means stock price. Stock market, market price, stock price. Get it? Again, we're confusing people with different names. And book value means equity. So let me take my stock price, all the way at the top, and divide it by my book value per share, which I just calculated. So McDonald's is trading 2.4 times book. So that's actually not too outrageous. The stock price is 2.4 times the book value. But Yum Brands, the stock price is 4.4 times the book value. And that's because the book value, they don't have as much equity at the Yum company. So, of course, their book value per share compared to the stock price is going to be higher in the market to book. Cash per share and revenue per share, we want to look. Cash per share is another liquidity term. Cash divided by outstanding shares. You could I'll do these calculations for you. And revenue per share, again, is revenues divided by outstanding shares. Okay. So what these basically mean, for every share of stock of McDonald's that I own, All right, so we created a industry average. The handout, your industry average is different because my formula was not with parentheses, sorry. But that's something I'll fix on the download of the spreadsheet. I'll download it, fix it, and re-upload it. But basically, we use the information from the stock price, the income statement and balance sheet. That's with all this information up here. And we calculated a series of financial ratios. Now, financial ratios generally in this category of liquidity, asset activity, debt, profitability, and market value. So there are sort of segments of these ratios where we'd like to put them in liquidity or asset activity, or sometimes called management activity, debt, profitability, and stock market related ratios. And what we're trying to do is look at each ratio and figure out which is the best company to, let me just hide this comment, it's in the way. Which is the best company to invest in? So one simplistic approach might be just to kind of look and maybe highlight the company with the best ratio in each category to kind of figure out who has the best set of ratios. This would just be sort of a visual. Let me just open up the ribbon. So if I went through and found the best Okay, so maybe I made like a color map here to kind of see. There's really no standout company. I guess McDonald's seems to do pretty well, but Wendy's and Yum have, their categories where they're the best as well. So trying to figure out which of these three companies is the best investment, as an analyst, you would want to look at the ratios you feel are most significant. In this case, I feel that the profitability ratios are very significant, as well as return on equity and revenue per share. So I would pick a number of categories that I think are most telling of this industry. I probably wouldn't look at the inventory or collection or asset turnover periods as much. So it's subjective. Each analyst would have to really come up with a rationale. And this is where the analytical part comes in, is when you write the analysis up, you have to explain, if I was to pick Yum Brands as the best company, I would need to explain why. I have to explain the ratios they excel in, the ratios they're not doing well in, and explain, each nuance to make an analyst report to convince people to buy or sell the stock, and hopefully to buy this stock. But that's one of the uses of this ratio analysis. When you work in the simulation, it becomes really critical to understand these ratios, because that's how you're measured in a year-over-year comparison. In improving, like that common size income statement we talked about, we want to look at how are we improving year-over-year, percentage-wise. And in the simulation, that gets totaled, become your points. And it may surprise you that you have a deficit when you thought you're pro forma. Next class, next chapter, we're talking about pro forma financial statements. As you see, you might have seen these here, the next year's pro forma financial statement. We're going to be discussing how those are calculated, why they're important. But you may have been disappointed in some of your practice rounds to see a surplus down here, only to discover that when the round was calculated, in your overview, you had a deficit. And that's usually only caused by one thing: unsold inventory. So your pro forma had factored in you're selling everything you forecasted. If you don't sell everything you forecast, your profits are lower, and you could have lower cash, which could lead to a deficit. So this is one reason I wanted to wait until you started doing the team competition, until I completed the ratio analysis. You had a better understanding of these ratios in the simulation and possibly how to improve upon them. And this assessment tab is a good thing to look at if you're doing poorly in any categories. And believe me, the practice simulations against static computer opponents, when you're playing the team competition against all these teams in class, it's going to up the game quite a bit. So it's not going to be as easy to make points as it was in the individual practice. Although one student shocked the hell out of me and earned a negative 3,000 points. I don't know how they did that. I have to look into it. I've never seen negative 3,000 points. I guess that's the case of someone micromanaging their time and saying, well, I only get points for completing this, so who cares how I do, and just running through it as fast as possible and not really using the opportunity to learn anything. But time constraint, I guess. Last subject of the class tonight, the DuPont analysis system. This system was designed by analysts to use the financial ratios to get a better idea of what's happening inside the company. So it's a way to dissect the financial statements using financial ratios to get an idea of what's wrong at the company. So it merges income statement and balance sheet together to make a summary of the measures of profitability. And the ratios, we talked about a bunch of ratios that are a measure of profitability. Return on assets, return on equity, net profit margin, operational profit margin, gross profit margin. So the DuPont system is going to relate the return on equity to return on assets. It's two key ratios we need to analyze. So I showed you tonight how to calculate return on assets and return on equity, and basically what they mean as far as making money on your assets or making money on your investment. Return on equity is making money on your investment. So we could show these in a series of equations. We could dissect them in this way, where return on assets could also be, our basic formula is net profit margin. You could calculate it by doing net profit margin times total asset turnover is another way of calculating return on assets. So what we did tonight was earnings divided by total assets is how we calculated it on that spreadsheet. But you could break it out by earnings divided by sales times sales divided by total assets. So now we're bringing in four categories here. So if return on assets is lower, it's got to be one of these three things. The two of them are the same. See, if you cross out sales, that's how you get these two. Like basic math there. You just were to cross out sales like you do in any math problem, and that's how you get the earnings over total assets. But if you want to kind of expand this equation, you get this. Which the more we expand the equations, the more we can find where the hidden problem is. And that's the whole reason for the DuPont system. Okay. Now, let's switch to return on equity. We could split that up too. So we could take the formula we generally use is earnings divided by common stock. But you could break it out by earnings divided by assets, and then assets divided by total common equity, stock equity, or common stock equity. And again, same situation, if you cross out the assets, that's how we get this formula here. So we're trying to expand the formula to include more categories. All right. This is sort of the end result. So let me make this bigger here. Okay. If we want to look at return on equity, this is my return on investment. So if my return on investment is going lower and I want to know why, there's only two reasons that my return on equity, two big reasons my return on equity can be lower. It might be that my return on assets are lower, or my financial leverage multiplier has increased or decreased, has decreased. And you multiply, by multiplying return on assets by the financial leverage multiplier, we get return on equity. And how do you calculate the leverage multiplier? You take your total assets and total liabilities and shareholders' equity. That's liabilities and equity together, is going to equal total assets. But we divide that by the common stock, and we get our leverage multiplier. So, seeing how much leverage there is in the company. The more leverage you have, the more your the bigger multiple of return on assets you're going to have. So say the problem was in the multiplier. So then we would look on this side, we try to see if it's in the multiplier, we go all the way back here and say, is it originating from the change in current liabilities and long-term debt? That gives us our total liabilities. Is one of these liability sections growing or shrinking? And if we take our total liabilities plus shareholders' equity, we get our liabilities and equity divided by common equity to get the multiplier. So it's basically saying all these 6 boxes are related, but one or more of these boxes may be causing the multiplier to change. So if we see that everything's the same except for current liabilities, we know that we took on additional current liabilities, and that's why the multiplier is higher. And that could be a reason for why the return on equity is higher. Remember, the more leverage you have, the higher your return on equity. All right. Now, you generally don't understand this the first time someone explains it, so don't feel terrible if you're lost or a little bit confused. It does help when you read the textbook on this. Okay, so if return on equity, let's do the other half of the equation. If return on equity was the reason my return on, if return on equity was lower, and the reason it was lower is because my return on assets were lower, then I'd have to look to this side of the equation. And one thing that can make your return on assets lower is a lower profit margin. So we take the profit margin multiplied by the total asset turnover, we would get, these are the two numbers multiplied against each other, which I showed you 2 slides back that calculate return on assets. So if return on assets are lower, we don't like lower return on assets, we want higher return on assets. So if this was lower, it's either a problem with the total asset turnover or a problem with the net profit margin. All right? So say the problem was with the net profit margin. The net profit margin was lower, which is causing the return on assets to be lower. So if the net profit margin is lower, it could be because our costs went up. Or maybe our costs stayed the same, but our sales went down. Or maybe our operating expenses increased. Or our interest expenses increased, or our taxes increased, or our dividends paid increased. So we basically would go back to, is it something coming from earnings? So these would be the earnings categories. Or is it something coming from sales? So if we have fixed costs and our sales go down, our profit margin goes down. So we want to look at, is this a problem with sales, or is it a problem with expenses? Or maybe it's taxes. If it's a problem with expenses, if your net profit margin is going down, it might, especially in a simulation, it's a problem with your expenses. You have too much costs and expenses. So so if we piled it all down to cost of goods sold, because this is the only thing that changed, and this got bigger, and that's why our profit margins are lower because our costs went up, we need to go in there and redesign our products to make them cost less. And that will fix the problem. So the whole point of this DuPont system is to point a finger at a ratio. We want to point a finger at the problem. You're the problem. Why are our costs up? You're a cost of goods sold manager. Why did our costs go up? And you say, well, our salaries went up, material costs went up. And I say, well, what can we do about it? The management gets together and says, we redesign our products to use less materials. We redesign our products to use less labor. In the automobile manufacturing, it used to take 500 hours to make a car. Now it takes 40 hours of manpower to make a car. Why? All those robotics. Ever see those videos of factories where those arms are coming out and they're like, and they're like making the components for the car and putting the car together? Lowers the labor costs. So again, if we have a problem with our assets, it may be because our net profit margin has decreased, and if that decreased, we want to see if it's earnings or sales that's the problem. If sales are the problem, then we know we have to do more advertising, more sales promotion. We have to get those sales up, maybe new products. So this is sort of a management system using the ratios to figure out what went wrong. Say it wasn't the profit margin that decreased, but the total asset turnover decreased. These two multiplied, we get return on assets. If total asset turnover is the problem, that's sales divided by assets. Gives us a total asset turnover. If that's the problem, then it's either going to be a fact that we increased our assets too much, or we didn't increase our sales enough, or our sales went down. So in the simulation, a lot of companies will increase their assets too quickly, and that's going to ruin your total asset turnover, and then that ruins your profit margin. So you have to keep an eye on, make sure your sales are increasing as fast as your assets to make sure that this maintains or doesn't deteriorate. Now, if sales were the problem, then we know we have to increase sales. We stop there. But if it's total assets the problem, we have to look, is it our current assets or our fixed assets? Is it because, in a lot of cases, in your case, it might be inventory, which is a current asset. So then the manager finds the problem. It's in the assets. It's in the current assets. It's in the inventory. Okay, we have to make sure that we don't have a lot of inventory, and that will fix this problem. So you see how you can use these ratios to boil it down to where the problem is? That's the basic concept of the DuPont analysis. We want to figure out, if assets are not performing, is it a factor of sales or assets? If it was sales, we stop there and we fix the sales problem. We buy another company, we make new products, we advertise better. If assets are the problem, we look to figure out, where are our assets increasing, long-term or short-term? If it's short-term, is it inventory, cash, or receivables? You know, that's why in your company, if your company starts having too much of a cash balance, you get into $200,000 cash surplus, that's not good, because that's going to make your assets bigger and make your return on assets lower and your return on equity lower. So if you have too much cash, you need to pay down debt, you need to buy back stock, you need to invest in the company. So this is what this DuPont system is trying to do. Back here, to go back, you know, if the problem isn't assets, it's leverage. It may be the fact that your company is not leveraged enough. And that could be a result of a change in your liability, lowering your liabilities, paying your liabilities off too soon. It could be a change in your common stock equity, the amount of common stock equity you have. So the more equity you have, the lower the financial multiplier. So if we have, say this was $1 and this is $1, the multiplier is 1. 1 divided by 1. Say this is $2 and this is $1. That's a leverage multiplier of 2. The more multiplier we have, say this is $3 and $1, we have a leverage multiplier of 3. If we leverage 3 times, our return on equity is going to be a higher percentage. Just like the example with the 2 cars. The more money you borrow, the higher return on your investment, your return on your equity. However, there's a dark side to this. Because you would say, why don't I just borrow a lot of money and then blow out my return on equity number to a very high percentage? You could do that, but the analyst is going to be suspicious that you're taking on too much debt, and is going to say your company's too risky. And don't buy it, the company's too risky. If sales or profits go down, they won't be able to afford all the debt they took on. This happened to a company, since we're on the theme of fast food tonight, there used to be a company called Boston Chicken. And Boston Chicken was the Chipotle of their day. People loved it. Lines were out the door. You probably couldn't imagine Boston Market have lines out the door. Usually you go, there's one other person on line, and they work there. You know. But there was a time where there was lines out the door and down the block. They were borrowing money like mad and opening up franchises everywhere. Actually, they weren't opening up, they were funding a lot of these stores directly. They weren't opening up franchises, they were buying stores, and they took on so much debt and they expanded so quickly, and then the markets changed and the interest on their debt went up and they couldn't afford to pay it. So Boston Chicken went bankrupt. And there was nothing wrong with their stores. The stores had sales, increasing sales and popularity, but they expanded and borrowed too quickly, and then they went bankrupt. Guess who came to the rescue? McDonald's. McDonald's came in and said, get rid of that chicken and say market. And McDonald's bought Boston Chicken out of bankruptcy, and they were originally going to turn them all into McDonald's locations. But then they realized that a lot of them were like across the street from McDonald's, and then they said, you know, maybe we'll keep it for diversification. So that way, you know, because people, they may only want to go to McDonald's once a week and Boston Market once a week, we'll get more business. So they kept it, they fixed it up, and I first realized this when I went to a Boston Market, and the lids for the sodas had those little McDonald's M's on them. And the coffee stores were McDonald's I'm like, oh, I guess they bought them. They fixed them up and then they sold them for a profit. And now they're their own company again, but they're not public. But that was a lesson of borrowing too much money too quickly. They had a very high return on equity, but they got so risky they went bankrupt. And once you go bankrupt, shareholders lose all their money. All the stockholders lost everything that were invested in Boston market. And then the bondholders will also lose money too, because they'll have to settle for a payout that's a fraction on the dollar. So that's why analysts look very closely at the liabilities to make sure companies aren't close to going bankrupt. Okay, so the DuPont system, this is sort of an introduction to the DuPont system. I don't expect you to be an expert on this for this class, but you may want to look at this in relationship to the company you're running and the financial ratios you're going to be generating. Okay. So this is just more analysis. Okay, so we are done with this chapter. These are our learning goals we went through. So now what you have to do is finish out the My Finance Lab homework, do the spreadsheet for Chapter 3, and the spreadsheet is a lot bigger than Chapters 1 or 2, and complete the round 1 of the team simulation of the Zoom.